When I pulled into my driveway after 3 days away, I counted nearly 40 cars surrounding my house. Why were strangers carrying wine into my living room? Why was my mother's name printed on a welcome banner while mine appeared as the event sponsor? And why did my phone buzz with a text that simply read, "Please don't embarrass me today"? I hadn't agreed to any of this. Then my mother smiled, pressed a hotel key card into my hand, and said, "All the bedrooms are taken, Caitlin. You can sleep at the Marriott. Family comes first." As I stared at the glossy event program listing me as the financial sponsor, I realized losing my house for a weekend wasn't the real problem. Before I tell you how this unbelievable weekend unfolded, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave your country and your local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if family drama, real boundaries, and hard-earned justice are the kinds of stories you enjoy, consider subscribing so you won't miss what happened next. I wish I could tell you I immediately threw everyone out. Looking back, that probably would have felt satisfying for about 5 minutes. Instead, I took one slow breath, slipped the hotel keycard into my purse, and reminded myself of something I'd learned managing software projects worth millions of dollars. When people are confident they've done nothing wrong, they talk, they explain, they volunteer information nobody asked for. If I exploded now, I'd only get one version of the story. If I stayed quiet, I might get the truth. I forced a smile that felt painful. "I just need a minute," I told my mother. Carol patted my shoulder as if I were the child in this situation. "I knew you'd understand," she whispered. "This is bigger than you." That sentence stayed with me. Bigger than me. Not bigger than our family, not bigger than the charity, bigger than me. She wasn't even pretending this was my house anymore. The first floor had been transformed. The dining room held rows of silent auction baskets, designer handbags, vacation packages, restaurant gift cards. The family room had become a stage with a microphone and a projection screen displaying photographs of children from the nonprofit Carol claimed she was supporting. Round tables filled my backyard beneath rented white tents. Professional servers carried trays of appetizers I'd never ordered. A jazz trio played near my swimming pool. None of this looked cheap. I mentally started adding numbers: tent rental, furniture, lighting, audio equipment, flowers, catering, entertainment, valet parking. This wasn't a $5,000 family event. This looked closer to $50,000, maybe more. Guests kept recognizing me from Carol's introductions. There she is. A woman in a navy dress hugged me before I could react. "Caitlin, your mother has talked about your generosity all evening." Another guest smiled. "It's inspiring that someone your age is willing to fund something like this." Fund. I laughed awkwardly. "I'm glad everyone is enjoying themselves." That was technically true. It also revealed nothing. An older couple shook my hand. "Your donation is changing lives." Donation. Another word I hadn't expected to hear. I thanked them and kept moving. Every conversation sounded almost identical. "Your mother is so proud. You've done something incredible. The Johnston family is amazing." Each compliment made my stomach heavier. Near the kitchen, I spotted a man wearing a black polo embroidered with Benson Premier Catering. He was directing servers while checking items off a clipboard. When he finally looked up, he smiled. "Ms. Johnston, great to finally meet you in person." I smiled politely. "I'm sorry?" "Mark Benson." He offered his hand. "We've been emailing for weeks." "Weeks. I'm glad everything came together," he continued. "Your mother handled most of the details, but you approved every major expense." My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. Slow was better. Slow meant I could think. "I've been traveling a lot." "I know," Mark said. "That's why electronic signatures made everything easier." Electronic signatures. There it was. I kept my face completely neutral. "I've been meaning to organize all my records," I said casually. "Would it be possible to email me copies of everything after the event?" "Of course." He looked surprised I didn't already have them. "We already sent complete invoices yesterday." "Yesterday?" "To your Gmail." I nodded as though that sounded familiar. "I've been buried in conference meetings." "No problem." He tapped his tablet. "I'll resend the full package." Within seconds, my phone vibrated, then again and again. Contracts, invoices, vendor agreements, payment schedules, insurance certificates. The subject lines alone made my chest tighten. I didn't open anything yet. Not here. Not in front of dozens of people. Instead, I thanked him. "You've been wonderful to work with," Mark said sincerely. That sentence bothered me more than anything. He genuinely believed I had hired him. Carol hadn't fooled only relatives. She had fooled professionals. As I walked away, Aunt Linda intercepted me. "There you are." She looked relieved. "I told your mother you'd come around." "Come around? About paying for all this?" She lowered her voice. "I know it's expensive, sweetheart, but families remember these things." I stared at her. I never said I didn't want to support charity. "There you go." She smiled. "I knew your heart would win." She hadn't heard a single word I'd actually said. That happened a lot in my family. People responded to the version of me they preferred instead of the one standing in front of them. Ryan found me a few minutes later carrying 2 bottles of sparkling water. "You okay? Do I look okay?" He sighed. "I told Mom this was getting out of hand. This morning. And you know how she gets." Yes, I knew exactly how she got. She spoke with absolute certainty until everyone else questioned their own memory. "She said you already approved everything." Ryan looked genuinely uncomfortable. I believed her. I studied his face. He wasn't lying. He honestly thought I knew. That distinction mattered. Manipulation often spreads because good people trust the wrong person, not because they're malicious. "Ryan." He looked down. "Did you help organize this?" "I moved some tables." "Anything else?" "I picked up flowers." He hesitated. "And signed for a few deliveries." "Using whose name?" "Mine." Relief washed over me. At least he hadn't pretended to be me. Before I could ask another question, Carol stepped onto the stage. She tapped the microphone. The music stopped. Conversations faded. "My wonderful friends." Applause filled my backyard. Carol smiled with the confidence of someone certain she controlled the room. "Tonight wouldn't have been possible without my amazing daughter." Every head turned toward me. "There she is." People applauded. Some even stood. I wanted to disappear. Carol extended one arm toward me. "Caitlin has always believed that when you've been blessed financially, you should give back." More applause. "She insisted we spare no expense." I felt dozens of eyes admiring me for decisions I had never made. Then Carol said something that changed the entire situation. "I know many of you have already purchased tickets, but Caitlin has generously agreed to match every donation made tonight." The applause became deafening. Someone immediately shouted, "I'll give 5,000 e." Another voice followed, "Count me in for 3." Volunteers rushed through the crowd carrying pledge cards. People began making commitments based on a promise I had never made. I looked at Carol. She never looked back at me. She was smiling for the audience, as if she'd rehearsed every second. My phone vibrated again. It was a new email from Mark Benson. The subject line read, "Urgent credit card decline, need updated payment before midnight." I didn't wait until Monday. The moment the fundraiser finally wound down and the last guests began leaving, I drove straight to the Marriott my mother had so generously reserved for me. I never checked into the room. Instead, I sat in the hotel lobby with my laptop, a cup of coffee I barely touched, and every email Mark Benson had forwarded. By midnight, my inbox contained over 60 documents: contracts, invoices, equipment rentals, alcohol permits, entertainment agreements, insurance certificates, parking services, floral arrangements, portable restroom rentals for the backyard. Every document seemed professionally prepared. Every document appeared legitimate, and every single one carried my name. At first glance, nothing looked obviously fake. That was what frightened me. Whoever had put this together hadn't simply forged a signature on one piece of paper. Someone had built an entire paper trail. I opened the catering contract first. There it was. Caitlin Johnston. An electronic signature appeared neatly at the bottom. The timestamp showed it had supposedly been signed nearly 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks ago, I'd been leading a software implementation in Seattle. I pulled up my work calendar. Every day that week had been booked with client meetings from early morning until evening. Could I have signed something electronically from a hotel room? Technically, yes. Would anyone else know I hadn't? Probably not. I opened another document. Same signature, another. Same signature, another, exactly the same. Not similar, exactly. I enlarged the signatures until they filled my screen. That was when I noticed something odd. Every signature landed at precisely the same angle. Exactly the same size, exactly the same placement, no variation whatsoever. I've signed enough digital documents for work to know that's unusual. Even electronic signatures shift slightly depending on the document. These didn't. It looked less like someone signing dozens of agreements and more like someone repeatedly stamping an image. I made a folder labeled Evidence. Then I started downloading everything. Nothing would stay only in my email. Around 1 a.m, I called my bank. The automated system connected me with the 24-hour fraud department. After verifying my identity, the representative asked calmly, "What transaction are you calling about?" "Miss Johnston." "Oh, I'm not sure yet." There was a brief silence. "I'm concerned someone may have been attempting to use my information." "I understand." She placed me on a short hold. When she returned, her tone had changed. "I do see several unusual authorization attempts." My stomach tightened. "How many?" "7. 7. Not one mistake. 7 separate attempts." "Were any approved?" "No." I finally exhaled. They were declined for different security reasons. "What kinds of charges?" "I'm going to transfer you to one of our fraud investigators. They'll be able to explain everything in more detail." A few moments later, another voice came onto the line. "Daniel Pierce with Financial Security Investigations." His voice was calm and methodical. I immediately liked him. He didn't rush. He didn't speculate. He asked questions. "When did you first suspect unauthorized activity?" I explained everything from the moment I arrived home. He interrupted only to clarify dates and names. When I mentioned the fundraiser, he became quiet. "You said vendors believed you authorized payment." "Yes." "And someone represented you as the financial sponsor." "Exactly." "I'd recommend documenting every conversation while it's still fresh." "I already started." "Good." He typed for a moment. "I can confirm 7 authorization attempts over the past 48 hours. Were they all from the same company?" "No." He read slowly. "Catering. Tent rental. Entertainment. Audio equipment. Event insurance. Luxury transportation. Printing services." Each category matched documents sitting in my inbox. "The total attempted charges exceeded $68,000. I stared across the nearly empty hotel lobby. 68,000. I earned a good living. I had savings. But no one casually absorbs $68,000 because a parent decided to host a party. How were they stopped? Daniel answered matter-of-factly. Your card issuer flagged unusual spending patterns. He paused. And one merchant entered incorrect verification information. So if they hadn't, the charges may have processed before being disputed. He wasn't trying to scare me. He was explaining reality. What should I do now? Don't delete anything. I won't. Don't contact merchants asking them to change documents. I'm not. And don't accuse anyone until you understand exactly how your information was used. That advice sounded strangely familiar. Evidence first. Emotion later. I'll open a formal investigation this morning. Thank you. Before hanging up, Daniel added one more sentence. If someone had access to previous documents containing your signature, we may be able to determine whether an image was reused rather than newly authorized. That sentence stayed with me. Previous documents, old paperwork, old files. Around 8 that morning, I drove to Melissa Carter's office. Melissa had been my best friend since college. She also happened to be one of the sharpest real estate and civil litigation attorneys I'd ever met. She listened without interrupting while I spread contracts across her conference table. When I finished, she leaned back. First, she said, I'm sorry. Then she picked up the catering agreement. This isn't just about a family argument anymore. I know. She studied the signature. Interesting. What? She placed several contracts side by side. See this? The signature. No. She pointed to the authentication certificates attached to each document. These agreements weren't all signed from the same system. I frowned. What does that mean? Some were supposedly signed from a desktop. She moved another page. Others from a mobile device. Another page. And these from a tablet. She looked at me. Were you using 3 different devices across multiple states during that period? No. I didn't think so. She smiled slightly. That's actually helpful. She opened another attachment, then another. 5 minutes later, she stopped smiling. Caitlin. What? I think someone built these contracts over time. What do you mean? I don't think this was a last-minute decision. She tapped a series of timestamps. Some of these documents are over a month old. A month, she nodded. This fundraiser wasn't thrown together. It was planned. And whoever planned it expected your name to carry the financial responsibility. The room suddenly felt much colder. This wasn't one impulsive weekend. Someone had been preparing for weeks while I knew nothing. Just then my phone buzzed. Ryan. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Caitlin. He sounded exhausted. I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I asked Mom this morning why your credit card wasn't working. My grip tightened around the phone. What did she say? Ryan hesitated. Then quietly he answered, She said it didn't matter because eventually you'd pay for everything anyway. I closed my eyes. And why did she think that? His next words hurt more than anything I'd heard all weekend. She said, he swallowed hard. She said you owe the family because you're the only one who ever made real money. The room fell silent. Melissa watched my expression without saying a word. When I ended the call, she slid a legal pad toward me. I need to ask you one question. What? Has your mother ever had access to your important personal documents? I answered automatically. Years ago. What kind of documents? My house closing paperwork. I stopped speaking. A memory I hadn't thought about in nearly 6 years suddenly came rushing back. When I'd moved into my house, I'd been traveling constantly for work. I had asked my mother to keep one fireproof storage box in her basement until I had time to organize my office. Inside that box were copies of my mortgage documents, closing paperwork, insurance records, and several pages bearing my real signature. Melissa slowly lowered her pen. "I think," she said quietly, "we need to find out exactly what else was in that box." I hadn't thought about that fireproof box in years. Like so many things you trust family with, it disappeared into the background of my life. I remembered carrying it into my mother's basement shortly after buying my house. At the time, I was working 12-hour days and traveling almost every week. My garage was still full of unopened moving boxes. "Keep this for a little while," I'd told her. "No problem," she'd replied. I never questioned it again. Now sitting across from Melissa, that decision felt painfully naive. She closed the folder in front of her. "Before we assume the worst, let's verify facts." I nodded. "I don't want theories." "I don't either." She grabbed her laptop. "The good news is that property ownership is public record." Within minutes, she had pulled up Mecklenburg County's online property database. My address appeared exactly where it should. Owner Caitlin Johnston. No co-owner. No transfer. No lien I didn't recognize. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "So that the house is still mine?" Melissa gave a small smile. "Legally, yes. But your ownership isn't the only issue." She clicked another tab. "There are other filings connected to property use." I watched her search through county records, permit applications, and public filings. Most of them meant nothing to me. Then she stopped scrolling. "That's interesting." "What?" She turned the screen toward me. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a mortgage. It was an application for a temporary special event permit. The property address was mine. The event description matched the fundraiser almost exactly. Applicant Carol Johnston, my mother's mailing address, my mother's phone number, my mother's email. But under the section asking for authorization from the property owner, someone had attached a signed statement claiming permission had been granted. Melissa enlarged the attachment. The signature looked like mine. Again. "This application was rejected," she said. "Why?" "They requested additional documentation proving authorization." "So they never approved it?" "No." "Then why did the event happen?" Melissa leaned back. "Because plenty of events happen without permits." "Isn't that illegal?" "It depends." She folded her hands. "But that's not the point." "What is? The point is, someone was comfortable submitting government paperwork using your identity." The room became very quiet. This wasn't simply embarrassing anymore. Someone had crossed into territory that involved official records. Melissa continued reading. "The county requested proof that Carol had authority to use the property. And nothing was ever submitted. So she just ignored them. Looks that way." I rubbed my temples. If they rejected it, then she likely hoped no one would notice. I stared at the screen. My mother hadn't accidentally overstepped. She had continued after being told she couldn't prove she had permission. That changed everything. Melissa printed copies of every document. "Keep these." She handed me a folder. "Never rely on online records staying exactly where you found them." As we left her office, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello, Miss Johnston?" "Yes." "This is David Ellis with Carolina Mutual Insurance." My stomach tightened. "Insurance. I'm returning your voicemail." I frowned. "I didn't leave one." A pause. "I'm sorry. I haven't contacted your company." "I see." He sounded confused. "Well, someone called yesterday asking questions about liability coverage related to your fundraising gala." "My what?" "The charity event at your residence." I looked at Melissa. She had already guessed something was wrong. "I never called. Are you saying you weren't the event organizer?" "No." He became noticeably more careful. "Would you mind answering a few questions?" "Please." "Was admission charged?" "I believe tickets were sold." "Were vendors hired?" "Yes." "Alcohol served?" "Yes." "Live entertainment?" "Yes." He sighed quietly. "Miss Johnston, if a private residence is used for a commercial fundraising event without the homeowner's authorization, there can be significant insurance implications." "What kind of... what?" "If someone had been injured, your homeowner's policy might not have covered the claim." I felt sick. "So, if someone had fallen into my pool, you could have faced personal liability depending on the circumstances." I closed my eyes. It wasn't only money. My entire financial future had been placed at risk. David continued. "The person who contacted us represented herself as coordinating the event." I already knew the answer. "Was it Carol Johnston?" "Yes." He hesitated. "She indicated she was handling everything on behalf of the homeowner." Melissa motioned for me to put the phone on speaker. I did. David continued. "She also asked whether future annual events could be covered under the same policy." Melissa and I looked at each other. Future annual events? This wasn't supposed to happen once. Carol intended to do this again. Every year. After thanking David, I ended the call. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Melissa broke the silence. "She's been planning long term." "I know." "No." Melissa shook her head. "I don't think you do." She pointed toward the insurance notes. "People don't ask about annual coverage unless they've already decided this will become a tradition." I stared out the window. Growing up, my mother loved hosting holiday dinners, church lunches, neighborhood cookouts. She genuinely enjoyed bringing people together. Some of my happiest childhood memories happened around crowded tables. Maybe that was why she'd convinced herself this wasn't wrong. She wasn't trying to steal my house. She believed she was borrowing it. Borrowing my money. Borrowing my reputation. Borrowing my identity. Because in her mind, they all belonged to the family. The realization hurt in a different way. If she'd acted out of greed alone, this would have been easier. Instead, she'd wrapped entitlement inside love. That made it much harder to untangle emotionally. Melissa interrupted my thoughts. "There's something else we need to verify." "What?" "The charity." I frowned. "What about it?" "If this fundraiser truly benefited them, we need to know exactly how." She searched online until she found the nonprofit's website. The annual fundraiser wasn't listed. Neither was my address, nor my mother's name. Only a general donation page. That's strange. Melissa picked up the phone and called the nonprofit's office. After introducing herself, she asked to speak with someone responsible for fundraising partnerships. A few minutes later, Rachel Owens came on the line. Melissa briefly explained that we were reviewing documentation connected to Saturday night's event. Rachel sounded pleasantly surprised. "Oh yes, Carol Johnston." "So you're familiar with the fundraiser?" "We're aware she organized an independent community benefit. Did your organization approve the budget?" "No." "Were ticket sales handled through your office?" "No." Rachel sounded confused now. "Carol told us she'd make a donation after expenses." Melissa looked directly at me. "What percentage of ticket revenue was supposed to go to the charity?" Rachel hesitated. "I'm actually not sure." "You don't know?" "No. We were simply told we'd receive the remaining proceeds. Remaining after expenses." My pulse quickened. I remembered the expensive tents, the luxury catering, the live band, the decorations. Every extravagant choice reduced the amount left for charity. Melissa thanked Rachel and ended the call. Then she quietly asked, "Caitlin, Do you know exactly how much money was collected Saturday night? I didn't. And do you know where it went? I slowly shook my head. Melissa opened a fresh legal pad and wrote 4 words across the top. Follow the money. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. A notification from my home security system. The cloud storage had finished uploading every recording from the weekend, including indoor audio from the kitchen where my mother believed no one could hear her private conversations. I had installed the security system 2 years earlier after a package theft in my neighborhood. At the time, my mother had laughed. "Caitlin, nobody wants your Amazon boxes that badly." I smiled then and let the comment pass. What Carol never paid attention to was how the system actually worked. The outdoor cameras recorded video. The indoor cameras in the common areas, the entryway, kitchen, mudroom, and family room, recorded video and audio whenever the alarm was set to away mode. Since I'd been in Atlanta all week, the house had remained in away mode until I unlocked the front door Saturday afternoon. Everything that happened before I arrived had been uploaded automatically to encrypted cloud storage. Nobody had deleted anything. Nobody even knew it existed. Melissa leaned closer as I opened the app. "We're not watching everything," she said. "We're looking for specific moments." She was right. There were nearly 3 days of recordings. We started with Friday morning. The house was empty for hours. Then, just after 900 a.m., the front door opened. Carol walked in carrying grocery bags. Ryan followed with folding tables. For the first 20 minutes, nothing seemed unusual. They discussed where to place chairs. They measured the backyard. They debated where the stage should go. It sounded like any family preparing for a large gathering. Then another man entered. I recognized him immediately. Mark Benson, the caterer. He spread blueprints and equipment layouts across my kitchen island. "I'll need final payment before Saturday," he said. Carol smiled confidently. "My daughter always takes care of her commitments." Mark nodded. "I've never had any concerns." He pointed toward the paperwork. "I just need confirmation the card goes through." Carol answered without hesitation. "It will." Melissa paused the recording. "Listen to her wording." I frowned. "What about it?" "She didn't say she would pay." "She said you would." That distinction mattered. Carol never personally accepted responsibility. She kept speaking as though she were simply representing me. We continued watching. Around lunchtime, another volunteer arrived carrying stacks of printed programs. Carol flipped through them proudly. "There," she smiled. "Caitlin Johnston, presenting sponsor." One volunteer looked uncertain. "Shouldn't we ask her first?" Carol laughed. "Oh, honey. She'll complain for about 10 minutes. Then she'll realize family comes first." Everyone else laughed, except Ryan. He looked down at the floor. That tiny detail caught my attention. He wasn't comfortable. He simply wasn't brave enough to object. Melissa wrote another note. Ryan knew something wasn't right. Noted. We skipped ahead to Friday evening. The house buzzed with preparation. Boxes filled every room. Flower deliveries, rental furniture, lighting equipment, nothing especially important. Then around 7:40 p.m., Carol's phone rang. She placed it on speaker while continuing to arrange centerpieces. A woman's voice came through. "Carol, this is Rachel from the foundation." Rachel Owens. Carol brightened immediately. "Rachel, everything's ready." "I just wanted to thank you again." "We're grateful for your support." "Of course." Rachel hesitated. "I wanted to clarify one thing." Carol kept arranging flowers. "What is it?" "Our treasurer asked approximately how much we should expect after expenses." Carol answered so quickly it sounded rehearsed. "I honestly won't know until everything settles." "Of course. We trust you." The call ended. Melissa slowly shook her head. They trusted her? Yes. And she relied on that trust. Neither woman sounded dishonest. Rachel simply assumed Carol was acting in good faith. That assumption was becoming expensive. We fast-forwarded to Saturday morning. Guests hadn't arrived yet. The kitchen became command central. Volunteers organized name tags. Carol directed traffic like a professional event planner. Then came the conversation that changed everything. Carol lowered her voice. She thought everyone had left the room. Only Ryan remained. Did you move Caitlin's mail? Yeah. Good. Any bills? A few. Put them in the office. Ryan hesitated. What about those bank envelopes? Carol answered immediately. Don't leave those on the counter. Why? I don't need her asking questions before tonight. Melissa paused the video again. Interesting. She wanted to delay you seeing your mail. I nodded slowly, which means she expected something important to arrive. Exactly. We kept watching. About 20 minutes later, another delivery driver knocked. He carried a thick overnight envelope. Ryan accepted it. Who is it from? He turned it over. I don't know. Carol reached for it. It's probably another invoice. She opened the envelope, pulled out several pages, read silently, then her smile disappeared. What is it? Ryan asked. Carol folded the papers immediately. Nothing. She slid them into her purse. What was it? Just paperwork. Ryan looked unconvinced. So why are you hiding it? I'm not hiding anything. She snapped faster than before. I'm preventing unnecessary drama. Melissa looked at me. Whatever was inside that envelope upset her. I rewound the recording, zoomed in. The camera couldn't read the documents, but it captured the return address on the envelope. Carolina Community Foundation, Rachel's organization. That's odd, I said. Melissa nodded. If Rachel already called Friday night, why overnight more paperwork Saturday morning? Neither of us had an answer. We made a note to ask later. Then we continued. By early afternoon, the guests had begun arriving. The cameras captured dozens of conversations. Most were harmless. Compliments, small talk, introductions. Then one exchange stopped us cold. A volunteer approached Carol carrying a cash box. We're almost out of receipt books. Carol looked around before answering quietly. Good. What should I do with the cash? Not here. Put it in the blue tote. What about checks? Separate pile. And online donations. I'll reconcile those later. The volunteer nodded. Nobody questioned the instructions. It sounded organized. Professional even. But something bothered Melissa. Pause. What? Did you notice what she never said? I replayed the conversation. Then it hit me. Carol never once said to deposit the money into the nonprofit's account. She only discussed separating it, organizing it, controlling it, nothing about transferring it. Melissa opened one of the vendor invoices, then another. She began making a list. Estimated ticket revenue, corporate sponsorships, silent auction, cash donations, checks, online contributions. Then she estimated expenses. The difference was substantial, potentially tens of thousands of dollars. We need real numbers, she said, not estimates. How? The bank? Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Rachel Owens. I answered immediately. Caitlin? Her voice sounded anxious. Yes. I think we've discovered a misunderstanding. What happened? Our accounting office just asked for the event deposit. And Rachel took a slow breath. Carol told us she'd transfer everything Monday morning. It's Monday afternoon. I know. My pulse quickened. Has she answered your calls? No. Texts, no. Rachel became very quiet before asking the question neither of us wanted to hear. Caitlin, do you actually know where yesterday's donation money is? I don't. It was the only honest answer I could give Rachel. I've never handled any of the money. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, she spoke. I believe you. Those 3 words carried more weight than she probably realized. For the first time since this nightmare had started, someone outside my closest circle wasn't looking at me with suspicion. She wasn't assuming I was making excuses. She was simply listening. I need to be transparent with you, Rachel continued. Our board treasurer has been asking for the deposit since this morning. Carol said the funds were being reconciled. What does that mean? It means she asked for more time. Did she tell you how much was collected? No. Did she provide any accounting? No. I glanced at Melissa. She was already writing another note. Delay. What happens if the money isn't delivered? I asked. Rachel answered carefully. We don't assume bad intentions. Community fundraisers sometimes take a few days to settle, but we expect documentation. After ending the call, Melissa leaned back. She's buying time. For what? I don't know yet. She tapped her pen against the table. But people delay for one of 2 reasons. They're overwhelmed. Or they're trying to solve a problem before anyone notices. Neither possibility made me feel better. Just then my phone buzzed again. Ryan. I answered immediately. Hey. Caitlin. His voice sounded strained. Mom wants everyone over for dinner tonight. I almost laughed. After everything, she says we're family. That's convenient. He sighed. I don't think she knows you've started asking questions. No. She thinks you're just upset about the party. That surprised me. Carol had known me my entire life. She knew I wasn't impulsive. She knew I didn't let things go once they stopped making sense. Either she was underestimating me, or she was convinced nothing could be traced back to her. I'm not coming to dinner, I said. I figured. Ryan hesitated. Can I come see you instead? Melissa looked up. I nodded. Come to Melissa's office. An hour later, Ryan walked in looking exhausted. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like someone who hadn't slept since Saturday. He sat across from us without speaking. Finally, he rubbed both hands over his face. I messed up. Melissa didn't interrupt. Neither did I. I thought Mom had talked to you. I swear. I never would have helped if I'd known. I believe you. He looked surprised. You do. I believe you believed her. He nodded slowly. She kept saying you wanted to surprise everyone. Then she said you were embarrassed because people would make a big deal about your donation. Everything sounded believable. I understood that. My mother had always been persuasive. She rarely lied in dramatic ways. She preferred mixing truth with assumption until people filled in the gaps themselves. Ryan reached into his backpack. I brought something. He placed a manila folder on the conference table. I found these in Mom's office. I opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten planning notes, guest lists, vendor phone numbers, donation estimates, budget calculations. Everything was organized with colored tabs. Carol hadn't thrown this together impulsively. She'd managed it like a professional event planner. Melissa flipped through the pages. Then she stopped. What is this? She pulled out a yellow legal pad. Across the top, written in Carol's handwriting, were the words ways to cover remaining costs below. That was a numbered list. Collect additional sponsorships, auction extensions, business donations, emergency credit. Then the final line. Caitlin will reimburse if necessary. I read it twice. Then a third time. Not ask Caitlin. Not talk to Caitlin. Not hope Caitlin helps. Will reimburse, as though my participation had never been optional. Ryan stared at the table. I found that yesterday. Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't believe she'd actually written it. Neither could I. Melissa quietly photographed every page before placing the originals into evidence sleeves. This is useful. Very. Ryan swallowed. There's something else. I looked up. What? You remember the blue tote? The one we'd seen on the security footage? Yes. I know where it is. My heart skipped. Where? In Mom's guest room closet. Does it still have the donations? I don't know. I didn't look. Melissa immediately shook her head. Nobody touches it. Ryan looked confused. Why not? Because if there's money inside, we don't want anyone accusing Caitlin of interfering with evidence. She was right. Everything had to be handled properly now. Ryan nodded. I understand. Then he said something that completely changed how I viewed him. I'll give a statement. The room fell silent. You don't have to, I said. Yes, I do. He looked directly at me. I spent my whole life taking the easy way out. When Mom crossed a line, I looked away. When she guilted people, I stayed quiet. When she used your success to solve family problems, I told myself it wasn't my business. His voice cracked. It became my business the moment she used your name. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. For the first time since this began, I felt like I hadn't completely lost my brother. Melissa opened her laptop. If you're willing, we'll write a factual statement. No opinions. No guesses. Only what you personally witnessed. Ryan nodded. For nearly 2 hours, he carefully described everything he remembered. Who delivered what? Who attended planning meetings? What Carol said? Which documents she handled? When vendors arrived? When the overnight envelope came from the foundation? He never exaggerated. When he didn't remember something, he simply said, I don't know. Melissa smiled after he finished. That's exactly how credible witnesses sound. As Ryan prepared to leave, he stopped in the doorway. Oh. What? I almost forgot. He reached into his pocket. This was in Mom's car. He handed me a folded receipt. It was from a local office supply store, printed the Thursday before the fundraiser. One item immediately caught Melissa's attention. Portable high-speed document scanner. I frowned. Why would Mom buy that? Melissa didn't answer immediately. She looked back toward the contracts spread across the table, then toward the copies of my old signature, then at the receipt. Finally, she spoke very quietly. I don't think she was only copying your signature. I felt a chill run through me. What do you mean? Melissa looked me straight in the eye. I think your mother may have scanned every important document she had access to years ago. I stared at the receipt for a long time. It wasn't expensive. Just under $200. By itself, it meant almost nothing. People buy scanners every day. The problem was the timing. 3 days before the fundraiser, 3 days before vendors expected final payments. 3 days before, my name suddenly appeared on contracts I had never seen. Melissa slid the receipt into an evidence sleeve. We're not going to build a case around this. I know. But we're going to ask a very simple question. What question? When did she buy it and what did she scan? For the first time all week, I felt something shift inside me. Until now, I'd been reacting. Now we had a plan, one built on facts instead of emotions. Melissa opened a checklist. We have 4 separate issues. She held up one finger. Identity misuse. A second. Unauthorized financial commitments. A third. Potential insurance liability. A fourth. And charitable fundraising. Each one involves different people. So we don't try to solve everything in one conversation. That made sense. She'd spent years untangling complicated civil disputes. I trusted her judgment. Who first? The insurance company. Why? Because they don't care about family drama. They care about facts. The next morning we met with David Ellis from Carolina Mutual. He greeted us in a conference room with a thick claim file already waiting. I appreciate you coming in. He shook my hand. I reviewed the information you provided. He opened the file. Our concern isn't simply that an event occurred. It's that someone represented herself as acting on behalf of the homeowner. He spread several printed emails across the table. I immediately recognized my mother's email address. Carol had asked questions about liability limits, guest injuries, property damage, parking claims. She had even asked whether volunteers counted as covered workers. David pointed to one sentence. This caught my attention. I leaned closer. The email read, "My daughter trusts me to handle everything, so you may communicate directly with me." I closed my eyes for a moment. She hadn't technically claimed to own the house. She'd claimed authority I had never given. David continued. If we'd issued any endorsements based on inaccurate information, there could have been significant consequences. Were any issued? No. Fortunately, additional documentation was never submitted. So nothing changed. Correct. Relief washed over me. At least one disaster had been avoided. David closed the file. I also need you to understand something. What? If someone had been seriously injured during that event, he paused. Your life could have looked very different. He wasn't trying to frighten me. He was explaining reality. One accident, one slip beside the pool, one drunk driver leaving the property, years of litigation. Everything I'd spent 15 years building could have been threatened. I thanked him before we left. Outside the office, I sat silently in my car. Melissa didn't rush me. Finally, I asked, "How did it get this far?" She answered gently, "Because everyone trusted the same person." That afternoon, we met Rachel Owens at the nonprofit's office. Unlike the fundraiser, everything there felt modest. Small staff, simple furniture, volunteers organizing donated school supplies. Nothing flashy. Rachel welcomed us warmly. I wish we'd met under different circumstances. So do I. She led us into a meeting room. On the table sat several folders. I pulled everything connected to Carol. There wasn't much. A partnership application, a brochure, a few emails, no financial agreements, no sponsorship contracts, no approved budgets. Rachel looked embarrassed. We should have required more documentation. Melissa shook her head. People operating in good faith usually don't expect deception. Rachel nodded sadly. Carol seemed wonderful. I know. I believed every word. She opened another folder. This is all we ever received. Inside was a simple letter. Carol had promised to donate the net proceeds after event expenses. No amount, no accounting requirement, no reporting schedule, nothing. Rachel sighed. We've held community fundraisers for years. We've never had a problem like this. Melissa asked the question that mattered most. Has any money been delivered? Rachel slowly shook her head. Not $1. The room fell silent. Even after all the ticket sales, the silent auction, the sponsorships, the donation matching promises, the charity had received nothing. Rachel folded her hands. Our board met this morning. They voted to suspend any public acknowledgement of the fundraiser until everything is clarified. I nodded. I think that's wise. She hesitated. I also need to tell you something. What? Your mother came here yesterday. That surprised all three of us. Why, she asked for another week. And we declined. Rachel looked directly at me. When she realized we wouldn't extend the deadline, she became upset. What did she say? Rachel took a slow breath. She told us the money belonged to her family before it belonged to anyone else. Melissa stopped writing. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that exactly? Rachel did. The money belongs to my family before it belongs to anyone else. No misunderstanding, no vague interpretation. Those were Carol's words. For the first time, I understood what had happened. The fundraiser had never truly been about charity. Charity had been the reason people bought tickets. But in my mother's mind, the event was solving a family problem. Her debts, her financial pressure, her reputation. She believed the nonprofit would simply receive whatever happened to be left over, if anything was left. As we prepared to leave, Rachel handed me one final envelope. This arrived the morning of the fundraiser. I immediately recognized it. The same overnight envelope we'd seen on the security footage. Carol had opened it before I ever returned home. What is it? Rachel smiled weakly. Our finance committee prepared a standard participation packet. Inside were several documents: event reporting guidelines, donation procedures, tax documentation, and one bright red cover letter. Across the top in bold print were the words, "All donation proceeds must be deposited directly into the foundation's account. Organizers may not hold or distribute charitable funds personally." Melissa and I exchanged a long look. Carol had read this. We'd seen her open the envelope. She knew exactly what the foundation required, and she chose to ignore it. That single document destroyed any argument that she had simply misunderstood the process. As we walked toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Linda. "Your mother is devastated. She's calling a family meeting Sunday. Everyone will be there. It's time you stop involving lawyers and remember she's still your mother." A second message arrived before I could respond. She says she's finally ready to tell everyone her side of the story. I looked at Melissa. She smiled for the first time that day. Good. Why good? Because we'll finally have an audience. By Sunday afternoon, my mother's house looked strangely familiar. Not because of the furniture, not because of the family photos lining the hallway, because once again she had gathered an audience before speaking to me. Only this time there were no caterers, no jazz band, no charity banners, just family. My Aunt Linda, 2 uncles, several cousins, Ryan, a few family friends who had known us for decades. Melissa sat beside me not as my spokesperson, but as my attorney and my witness. She carried one slim accordion folder. Nothing more. No dramatic stacks of binders, no rolling suitcase filled with evidence. Just one organized file. Carol stood in the living room before everyone had even taken a seat. "I'm glad you all came." Her voice sounded tired, almost fragile. For a brief moment I saw my mother instead of my opponent. Then she looked at me. "Caitlin, I never imagined you'd bring a lawyer into our family." Several relatives immediately nodded. The room tilted in her favor before anyone had heard a single fact. I didn't respond. Carol continued. "I made mistakes. That caught me off guard. I should have asked before using the house." A few people murmured in agreement. But there it was. None of this deserved what Caitlin has done. She turned toward everyone else. She's contacted banks, insurance companies, the charity, lawyers. She's trying to ruin me. Aunt Linda crossed her arms. "I don't understand why this couldn't stay private." One of my uncles added quietly, "Families should work things out themselves." Carol looked down at the floor. "I spent my whole life helping everyone. When your father lost his job, I was there. When Ryan struggled financially, I helped. When Caitlin worked 60-hour weeks, I watched her house. Every statement was true. That was how my mother operated. She rarely lied outright. She selected facts that encouraged people to reach the conclusion she wanted. Then she looked directly at me. I thought my daughter trusted me. I finally spoke. I did. The room became still. I trusted you enough to leave important documents in your care. I trusted you enough to give you keys to my house. I trusted you enough to believe you would call before inviting people into my home. Carol opened her mouth. I raised one hand. I'm not finished. It was the first time in my life I'd ever interrupted my mother. She actually looked surprised. Melissa quietly slid the accordion folder toward me. I removed exactly one document. Not 20, not 50, one. The printed fundraiser program. I held it up. Does everyone recognize this? Most people nodded. This is the program guests received at the fundraiser. I placed it on the coffee table. My name appears here as presenting sponsor. I looked at Carol. Did I approve that? She hesitated. I assumed yes or no. Silence. No. I took out a second document, the text message she'd sent before I arrived home. Please don't make a scene today. I passed copies around the room. Several relatives read it quietly. No one spoke. Carol shifted uncomfortably. I didn't want guests to feel awkward. I understand. I nodded. Neither did I. Melissa handed me another page. The catering contract. This agreement says I approved nearly every major expense. I turned toward Mark Benson's email printed beneath it. He believed I hired his company. Aunt Linda frowned. You didn't. No. I looked around the room. I'd never even met him before Saturday. Carol took a step forward. I was handling things for you. I calmly asked, did I ask you to? No. Did I authorize you to sign contracts? No. Did I tell you to promise people I would match donations? Her shoulders sank. No. No anger. No yelling. Just questions. Simple ones. Questions that only required honest answers. The room felt different now. People weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Carol. Melissa leaned toward me. Next. I nodded. The charity. I placed Rachel's cover letter on the table, the one Carol had opened before the fundraiser. I read the first paragraph aloud. All donation proceeds must be deposited directly into the foundation's account. Organizers may not personally hold or distribute charitable funds. I looked at my mother. When did you plan to tell them that? Carol stared at the carpet. I was going to. When I needed time. For what? She didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward Ryan, as though hoping he'd rescue her. He didn't. Ryan slowly stood. I need to say something. Nobody interrupted him. He looked at our mother first. I love you. You know I do. Carol's eyes filled with tears. But loving someone isn't the same as pretending they're right. She whispered, Ryan. He shook his head. I helped set up the fundraiser. I believed Caitlin knew. When I realized she didn't, I should have stopped everything. He reached into his pocket. I already signed a statement. Carol looked stunned. You what? I told the truth. For the first time, genuine panic crossed her face. Not anger, not embarrassment, fear. She looked back at me. You turned your brother against me. Ryan answered before I could. No! You did. The silence that followed seemed endless. Then Aunt Linda quietly asked the question no one had dared ask all week. Carol, where's the money? Nobody moved. Carol looked from one face to another. Finally, she whispered, I was going to replace it. Melissa didn't react. Neither did I. Aunt Linda blinked. Replace it. Carol nodded weakly. I borrowed it. My uncle frowned. Borrowed it for what? She covered her face. I had credit card debt. More silence. I was behind on the mortgage. Another confession. I thought. She couldn't finish. What? I asked softly. She lowered her hands. I thought if I could pay everything off first, then I could slowly put the donation money back before anyone noticed. No one spoke. There was nothing left to argue, no misunderstanding, no confusion, no paperwork mistake. Just one terrible decision followed by another. I looked at my mother for a long moment. I don't hate you, she looked up. But I can't keep protecting you from the consequences of choices you knowingly made. Tears rolled down her face. I never thought you'd investigate. I know. I thought you'd yell, then pay the bills. Her words hung in the room like a confession no attorney could have written more clearly. She had expected my guilt to finance her decisions. Instead, she'd met documentation, facts, patience, boundaries. Nobody defended her, not because they stopped loving her, because they could no longer deny what the evidence showed. As relatives quietly gathered their coats, Aunt Linda stopped beside me. She squeezed my hand. I owe you an apology. I smiled sadly. I appreciate that. Then Melissa's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, read the message, and looked at me. The Foundation's board just finished its emergency meeting. What happened? They've decided not to pursue criminal complaints. She paused. If every charitable dollar is returned through a legally enforceable restitution agreement. I looked at my mother. For the first time all week, the decision about what happened next wasn't hers anymore. When everyone left my mother's house that Sunday evening, nobody slammed a door. Nobody shouted. Nobody pointed fingers. The silence was far heavier than another argument would have been. Carol remained seated at the dining room table, staring at the fundraiser program that had started unraveling everything. For years, she had been the person everyone turned to for holidays, birthdays, and family decisions. Now she sat alone in a room full of folding chairs that no one had bothered to put away. I almost walked over to her. Almost. Instead, I quietly picked up my purse and left. There was nothing left to say that night. The next morning, Melissa called. I have good news. I laughed softly. I could use some. The Foundation's attorney accepted our proposal. What proposal? We suggested a civil resolution instead of pushing everyone toward criminal proceedings. I leaned back in my office chair. I didn't even know you'd sent one. I wanted to move quickly before emotions changed. That was Melissa, always thinking 3 steps ahead. She explained that because the nonprofit's board primarily wanted the charitable funds, not publicity or punishment, they were willing to cooperate if every dollar collected during the fundraiser was fully accounted for and returned through legally binding agreements. There are conditions, Melissa added. I'm sure there are. Full financial disclosure, repayment, written acknowledgments, and strict reporting. I nodded. Fair. She hesitated before continuing. Your mother agreed. That surprised me. So easily. Not at first, Melissa smiled. But reality has a way of simplifying negotiations. Over the next several weeks, accountants reconstructed the fundraiser from the beginning. Every ticket sale, every sponsorship, every auction bid, every online donation, every cash receipt, every vendor invoice. For the first time, I saw the event as numbers instead of emotions. Nearly $43,000 had been collected, far less than we'd estimated, still enough to make a meaningful difference for the nonprofit. After legitimate vendor expenses were verified, the remaining funds should have gone directly to the foundation. Instead, most of the money had been transferred into one personal checking account, Carol's. Some of it had already been used. Credit card balances, late mortgage payments, utility bills, a small personal loan. There were no luxury vacations, no designer handbags, no hidden investment accounts, nothing glamorous. Just years of financial problems she had hidden from everyone. That discovery didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it. Carol hadn't stolen because she wanted a bigger life. She'd stolen because she'd spent years trying to maintain the appearance of one. Melissa summarized it perfectly. She wasn't protecting her finances. She was protecting her image. That sentence stayed with me. Image. My mother had spent decades becoming the dependable woman everyone admired. The one who always hosted Thanksgiving, organized church events, delivered meals to neighbors, remembered birthdays, asked nothing in return, except maybe she had. She'd asked everyone to believe she never needed help herself. Eventually, pretending became more important than telling the truth. One afternoon, Ryan called. "You free? I can be. I'm outside." When I opened the front door, he stood there holding a toolbox. I frowned. "What's this?" You changed your locks." "I did. I figured you might want help installing new smart deadbolts too." I smiled for the first time in days. "You really don't have to." "I know. I want to." We spent the afternoon replacing every exterior lock, front door, back door, garage entry, even the gate leading into the backyard. At one point, Ryan looked up from his drill. "You know what hurts the most?" "What?" "I can't remember when helping Mom became easier than telling her no." I thought about that for a while. It probably happened one small compromise at a time. He nodded. "Yeah, I think you're right." When we finished, I deleted every old access code connected to my house. Then I created new ones. Only 3 people had them: me, Ryan, and my emergency house sitter. For the first time since buying the house, every person with access had my explicit permission. That mattered more than I expected. A week later, Melissa finalized another document. Not a lawsuit, not a settlement. Something simpler, a written boundary agreement. She smiled as she slid it across my desk. "This one's for you." I looked down. It wasn't legally required. It was personal. The first section covered property. No use of my home without written permission. No duplicate keys. No access while I was traveling. The second covered finances. No borrowing. No guarantees. No signing anything on my behalf. Ever. The third covered communication. No volunteering me. No making promises for me. No using my name in fundraising business or family commitments without my direct approval. Melissa folded her hands. "You don't have to give this to anyone." "Then why write it?" "Because boundaries are easier to maintain when you've defined them." She was right. For years, I'd believed being kind meant remaining flexible. Now, I understood something different. Healthy relationships require predictable boundaries, not endless exceptions. About 3 months after the fundraiser, I received an envelope in the mail. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Carol. I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I set it on my kitchen counter. It stayed there for almost a week. Not because I wanted to punish her, because I wanted to be certain I wasn't opening it out of guilt. When I finally did, there wasn't much inside. Just 4 handwritten pages. No excuses, no blame, no requests for money, no demands that I forgive her. The first sentence simply read, "I spent so many years trying to look like a good mother that I stopped being an honest one." I read the letter twice, then I folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. Healing wasn't something I owed anyone on a deadline. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. One last update. I'm listening. The restitution agreement was signed this afternoon. So it's official. Yes. Every repayment has a legal schedule. The foundation approved it, and your mother has voluntarily enrolled in financial counseling and family therapy. I looked out the kitchen window toward my quiet backyard, the same backyard where strangers had once applauded promises I'd never made. Do you think she'll change? Change? I asked. Melissa was quiet for several seconds. I honestly don't know. She paused. But change isn't your responsibility anymore. I smiled. For the first time in months, I believed her. Nearly a year passed before I hosted another gathering at my house. Not because I was afraid, because I wanted the next time people filled my home to feel different. For months after the fundraiser, I had avoided entertaining altogether. Every time I looked at the backyard, I remembered rows of rented chairs and strangers applauding a version of me that had never existed. It took time before those memories stopped owning the space. One Saturday morning in early spring, I stood in my kitchen holding a short guest list. There were only 12 names. Every one of them had been invited personally by me. No assumptions, no surprises, no one speaking on my behalf. I smiled as I sent the final text message. Looking forward to seeing you this Saturday. Dinner starts at 6. That was it. No elaborate theme, no speeches, no fundraising, just dinner. Ryan arrived first carrying homemade cornbread. I figured I'd contribute something. You've earned permanent cornbread duty. He laughed. I can live with that. Over the past year, our relationship had changed more than I expected. For the first time in our adult lives, we talked honestly. If one of us disagreed with the other, we said so. If one of us needed help, we asked. Without guilt, without obligation, without someone else deciding what we should do. It felt peaceful. Guests slowly began arriving. Melissa brought dessert. Rachel stopped by with a bouquet of fresh flowers. Even David Ellis accepted my invitation after joking that he hoped there wouldn't be any insurance claims this time. The laughter felt natural. Nobody was performing. Nobody was trying to impress anyone. The house finally felt like mine again. About 20 minutes before dinner, my phone buzzed. It was Carol. Her message was simple. I'm outside. If today isn't the right day, I'll understand. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Months earlier, that message would have made my stomach tighten. Now it simply presented a choice. I walked outside. Carol stood beside her car holding a small glass baking dish covered with aluminum foil. She looked older than she had a year earlier. Not physically, emotionally. There was a humility I'd never seen before. I made your grandmother's peach cobbler, she said softly. I wasn't sure if I should bring it. I smiled gently. Thank you. She didn't move. I'll leave if you'd rather. A year ago, she would have walked straight through my front door. Today, she waited for permission. That difference mattered. You can come in, I said, but only for dinner. She nodded immediately. Of course. No speeches. No discussions about the fundraiser. No asking relatives to take sides. I understand. And if I ask you to leave, I'll leave. No argument, no guilt, no reminders that she was my mother. Just acceptance. We walked inside together. Nobody gasped. Nobody whispered. Ryan hugged her. Melissa smiled politely. Rachel introduced herself. The evening unfolded in the most ordinary way imaginable. People shared stories from work. They debated college basketball. They complimented Ryan's cornbread. Melissa teased me about color-coding my pantry. For 2 hours, no one mentioned legal documents. No one mentioned investigations. No one mentioned betrayal. Near the end of dinner, Carol quietly carried empty plates into the kitchen. She stopped beside me at the sink. "I've been seeing my therapist every week." I nodded. "Ryan told me. I almost quit after the 3rd session." "I can imagine." She gave a sad smile. "My therapist asked me a question I couldn't answer." "What was it?" She looked down at the dish towel in her hands. "She asked why I believed being someone's mother gave me access to things that weren't mine." I didn't respond. She continued. "I realized I never separated love from entitlement." Tears filled her eyes. "I kept telling myself everything I did was for the family." She shook her head. "But somewhere along the way, the family became an excuse for whatever I wanted." It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't perfect. It sounded like someone still learning how to tell the truth. "I read your letter," I said. "I know." I didn't answer. I wasn't expecting one. She looked at me. "I just wanted you to know I finally understood why you stopped protecting me." I leaned against the counter. "I didn't stop loving you." "I know. You stopped rescuing me." For the first time in a year, we both smiled. Small, tired, real. Before she left that evening, Carol handed me one last envelope. Inside wasn't another apology. It was the final receipt from the restitution agreement. Every required payment had been completed ahead of schedule. Attached was a short handwritten note. Returning the money couldn't repair the trust I broke, but it was the first promise I kept without expecting someone else to carry the cost. After everyone went home, I walked through the quiet house, turning off lights one room at a time. The dining room, the living room, the kitchen, the backyard, everything was exactly where it belonged. No strangers, no banners, no hidden contracts, no promises made in my name. Before going upstairs, I opened the cabinet in my home office. Inside was a single archival box. The fundraiser program, the unauthorized contracts, the rejected permit application, the insurance correspondence, the bank fraud reports, the restitution agreement, Carol's handwritten letter, and the final receipt showing every charitable dollar had been repaid. I kept them all, not because I wanted to relive the worst chapter of my life, because they reminded me of something I never wanted to forget. Evidence gave me justice. Boundaries gave me peace. Those were two very different gifts. For years, I believed being a good daughter meant saying yes whenever my family needed me. Now I understand something I wish I'd learned much earlier. Love can survive healthy boundaries. Manipulation cannot. That house is still my home. Carol is still my mother. Ryan is still my brother. But today, every relationship in my life exists because it is built on honesty instead of obligation. And that's the first time I've ever truly felt at home. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't that family members can betray your trust. It was that love without boundaries can slowly become permission for other people to make choices that belong to you. Many of us are raised to believe that saying no to family is selfish. In reality, healthy boundaries protect relationships by making expectations clear. They prevent resentment from growing in silence and stop guilt from replacing honest communication. If you've ever been pressured to sacrifice your finances, your home, or your peace simply because family comes first, I hope this story reminds you that protecting yourself is not the same as seeking revenge. Accountability is not cruelty. Forgiveness is not the same as restoring unlimited access. Sometimes the healthiest relationship you can have with someone is one that includes clear limits, mutual respect, and consequences when trust is broken. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you loved? How did it change your relationship? Share your experience in the comments. Your story may encourage someone else who feels alone. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more thoughtful stories about family resilience, justice, and healing. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.